why are you bullish?
Well, why wouldn't you be bullish? I mean, even before all this stuff is happening, I think the people that have been around for a while have always been bullish. Like Bitcoin is just so transformational that it is hard to disregard it in any way whatsoever. And if you really understand it, I think you see the transformation potential, which is now coming to light and being more obvious to everyone else. But I guess right now, there are so many factors that right now you have I think the real beginnings of nation state adoption. So while El Salvador did become the first Bitcoin country, it is still very small relative to the US and many other countries. So I think the impact was not as profound because people are kind of writing it off. Like, okay, a small country is doing something. But with the US really going all in with the SBR, with the talk of their version of Bitcoin bonds, the Bit bonds, and with all the nation state mining, I think, like again, I talked about earlier, the calculus has completely changed. It's just a different equation completely now. So in my view, the ETFs were a critical unlock factor, and that was removing the blockage from TradFi money flowing into Bitcoin. Pre-ETF, you always had run-ups, and the run-ups would kind of fizzle out because the exchanges would be overloaded. They couldn't KYC and onboard fast enough. But with ETFs, there is no barrier now. The portal to TradFi capital is wide open. And you already see people taking advantage of that, like entities such as central banks and pension funds that are buying either ETFs or like MicroStrategy. So the exposure to Bitcoin is just a click now. It's like in your Robinhood trading account or whatever you want. So there's no barrier to capital inflow. Now, with the SPR, you have this sort of endorsement from the most powerful country on the planet so far. And that is really big. Like Hodl was saying, all these politicians, they're getting this dossier now saying, oh, Bitcoin is going to be put into a reserve and they're going to buy more. And there are all these things happening. So they kind of have to take action. And we talked about it earlier. The career risk is just gone now. And it's actually inverted that you have to have some sort of Bitcoin strategy or else you're putting national security at risk. And I think that is starting to play out because some of the conversations that we've been having at Janet 3 have accelerated. We've had a lot of conversations and they're kind of slow. They're waiting for this signal to say it's okay, which is kind of unfortunate when you think about it, because the countries that need Bitcoin the most to kind of catch up or get out of debt, they are probably the least willing to do something. But now, I think with the US telegraphing intentions to do a lot of Bitcoin-related activities and accumulation, it's changed a lot. So some timetables have been moved up. Some conversations that we're talking about doing something in 2026, they moved it up a year. I think they'll keep moving it up as things progress. But the general sentiment is there is some feeling of urgency now. And I believe the intent to acquire 3 million some odd Bitcoin from Cynthia Lummis's Bitcoin Act, coupled with the Bitbond proposal, it's probably not really felt or understood yet, but it will be felt and it will be understood. But 3 million Bitcoin is something like 14-15% of supply. If you factor in lost coins, it goes up to something like 19%. And that's just from one country. So there's just not enough Bitcoin to go around. And it's also a problem that countries don't yet understand, that there is a hard limit, because everyone's been living in fiat land for so long, where if you need money, it just materializes. If you make a mistake, you can undo your mistake by printing some more money to, patch it over. But there's just this absolute limit with Bitcoin that I don't think fully registers for normal people, retail investors, and for politicians and leaders of countries. But this is all going to reconcile, and it's going to reconcile very quickly. And you have at the same time this nation state adoption starting to move forward, MicroStrategy trying to buy more. The ETFs are buying more. And I think MicroStrategy alone has taken off two times, or maybe close to 3 times the amount of supply that will be mined in all of 2025. So Omega candles are coming. I just can't see it not happening. I just don't see us hovering at 80, 90, 100. I think we'll see a very violent move to the upside, and then suddenly retail is going to be interested because now it's FOMO season, and retail seems to only really understand FOMO.
What is your take in and around the IMF's influence in regards to a seeming lack of countries following suit with El Salvador over that period of time? Do you think that in the background there was pressure there for anybody that was looking at that? Because it seemed like there was interest out the gate, and then it's very clear, like and who knows whether Bukele's been pretty vocal about how they're going to continue to stack sats, but like I guess we will see how that plays out over the course of the year. But do you think that they were in the background the whole time saying, hey, like I think 94 countries have loans with the IMF? Were they basically firing a warning shot to all of them?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and we do see that. Like, we were engaged with the Central Bank of Suriname, and our proposal was just a very conservative 1% allocation. And we talked to them for months. We went there to meet with them in person. And then a week later, the World Bank went to visit, and then they just stopped talking. So you do see covert pressure being exerted. I'm not sure if you remember, but shortly after El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender, Honduras, the central bank, kind of randomly put out a notice saying, yeah, we're never going to do anything like that. And we had heard some rumblings that there were some people visiting at that time to exert pressure too. So there's a lot of this covert operations going on to suppress Bitcoin adoption in these countries that do have loans, and these organizations that exist to provide the loans engage with. So, if your job is to loan out money and keep countries in debt, then I think your incentive is to prevent them from ever getting out of debt. So the answer is yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the Confessions of an Economic Hitman playbook, right? Like the anybody who hasn't read it, effectively they send people in, offer that countries that have resources these loans that they don't expect them to be able to pay back, and as soon as they start to struggle to make payments, they'll say, well, we can just take some of your resources instead, and then they'll re-sign a new loan, but there'll be all these conditions of like, okay, you're only allowed to build infrastructure that allows us to extract your resources, and it just continues to snowball. And if you deny the loan or you say you don't want it, then oftentimes you're on the other end of a bullet. And so it's not, like they masquerade as these people that are trying to go around and help these countries out of tough spots. But when you look at the track record, it's horrendous. Like either they are the worst at what they do, or they're intentionally ruining all of these countries. And if you read Gladstein's book Hidden Repression, you will be screaming at the pages, listening to some of the garbage that they've done in some of these shit deals. But
yeah, but if you think about what can happen in the future, let's say the IMF does realize that Bitcoin is not going away, then their incentive would be to structure future agreements that they not only extract natural resources, but extract Bitcoin. So they can stipulate that if you mine Bitcoin, all Bitcoin goes to them. And unless you default, then you kind of have to play along with that game. So it's almost like you have to default at this point before things escalate further, and you're really locking everyone up in that country forever into debt slavery. So I could see like a lot of countries just saying, yeah, we default. Like, what you gonna do? And then just reboot on a Bitcoin standard, because if they think far enough ahead, that is where it's going to go. You're gonna have volcano mining to pay the IMF instead of that money going to the people. So it's almost like the ethical thing to do is to default at this point before things go on to a sound money standard. People were kind of expecting the executive order calling for the creation of the SBR or creating the SBR would kind of kick things off right away. But I think your average man on the street doesn't have any idea what's going on. They're not following the developments. They're not following the news. They're not aware of anything. I think fund managers are probably more aware, but it takes time for them to also move and get things going, and to set the processes that allow them to buy. And that's why I think ETFs, MicroStrategy, and MicroStrategy derivatives are sort of a shortcut path to that. And that can allow people to get in much faster. But in general, it takes a lot of time to gear up and pass the laws that are needed to start the whole process. And unfortunately, most of the world is waiting for things to signify that it is time, or actually a better way to say it, to signify it's too late, because that's the point at which there is no career risk. And I think Harry was mentioning something like that, right? Like there is this concept of career risk, which is if you do something with Bitcoin, then you're at risk. But the inverse is starting to become the new norm, which is if you don't do something with Bitcoin, your career is at risk. But yeah, it takes them a lot of time to kind of get there. And I think it's just a slow process. And the real price of Bitcoin is probably something like 200,000 right now, but we're not even there yet. And I believe it's just a matter of people reconciling that, the reality of what's happening with the actual price. And usually that happens in a very violent manner when there's such a big disconnect. But right now you see like a lot of analysts, and they're all kind of mid-curve. It's always like this. Like when things happen in a certain way, they kind of say it's going to keep happening in this way. So like when we dipped to 70 something, I saw a lot of people saying, okay, we're going to go to 50. So we just had a big drawdown of 30 some odd percent or 30%. And now your mid-curve take is we're going to go lower, right? Because you're fearful and you can't see anything past your own fear. And right now we're kind of like in this period of consolidation crab market. And I saw some new mid-curve takes, which is we'll have 8 to 12 months of more sideways chop. I mean, that's just not reading the macroeconomic trends or reading anything.
Gentlemen, do you want to tag on to this?
Well, the funniest thing is, wasn't the IMF telling America recently, like, you're not to buy Bitcoin because it might destabilize our economy? And it's like, hey, I don't remember fucking asking you. Shut the fuck up. Why do you think you get to speak to me? The fuck? It's like,
There's the ECB and was it ECB, and like they were complaining, yeah, it's going to destabilize our economic sovereignty or whatever. And now they're fast tracking their CBDC because govern me harder, daddy, right? Like that's their stance.
yeah, it's
I try to lean on that.
I was just gonna say, the economic hitman thing is totally accurate, and Bitcoin breaks the yoke that we have over some of these countries, or some of these international funds have over some of these countries, and they don't want that. They don't want people to leave the plantation. And if one person stands up and says I am Spartacus, then everybody stands up and says I am Spartacus, and then it's over.
I lean on the infinite wisdom of our friend Francis Poulier, and I tell them cry harder. Right? At the end of the day, let's say they're right and we crash our economy. Okay? We did so with free will and free spirit and free sovereignty. You're a non-sovereign actor trying to tell us what to do, how to run our lives. No. Not you. Not anyone can step into that role to do that. It's not how this works. And at the end of the day, there's a hierarchy of seigniorage that they have inserted themselves into. And so they have offloaded seigniorage capabilities to the US, and they've said, we can't subjugate the United States. We're going to subjugate the global South on the back of the US dollar hegemony. And the goal of Bitcoin is not necessarily, to break the state's ability to print their own money. It's just to create a credible alternative. And so, I think about, we say the words mass adoption, but we don't really define that terminology, or hyper-Bitcoinization. And, I think that's better defined, but still, hard to approach. I just think in terms that, am I able to demand my paycheck in Bitcoin, and am I able to demand payment for my goods and services in Bitcoin? And once I'm able to make that demand, I'm free. Because then I'm only able to engage in trade, which is fundamentally a free activity because it requires two consenting parties to engage in the exchange of a monetary good for a physical good or service, or digital good or service. And that foundational freedom of association between two parties without a governed monetary